Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is Richard Lyle, who is the Vice President here at Intralink. We're in his office at the moment. He's also the President of the British Chamber of Commerce here in Japan. Richard, welcome.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
So let's explain to people why you've got your arm in a sling here and talk a little bit about the nights in Lycra, because people won't know about that charity, but just give us a quick explanation of why you look like this today.
Yes. So the reason I have a sling on my arm is because during Golden Week, I had a cycling accident. I've been training for the past 9 months for a charity ride run by the Knights in White Lycra, a loosely British-based organisation which helps charities here in Japan. So every year they do an annual 500k ride, which I would have been riding this coming week, but unfortunately I came off my bike and fractured my shoulder. So I shall be volunteering for the event rather than actually cycling for the event.
Well done for you to be supporting charities here in Japan. I'm sorry to hear you've injured yourself, but you mentioned to me that it's not going to require surgery or bolts or anything like that. It's going to just naturally heal after you take some rest. So all the best for a speedy recovery. But we're here to talk about leadership. But let's start a little bit with, why are you in Japan? Why are you with Intralink? How did you get here? And, you become the president for the last 2 years, is it?
Yes,
right?
correct.
2 years, right, of the British Chamber, which we remember as well. So just give us a bit of the backstory on your Japan career.
Sure. So growing up in the UK in the sort of 70s and 80s, I was always interested in geography and travel. Would go on holidays with my parents to the south of France and Spain. But I always spent my time looking at maps, and Europe wasn't big enough. So I'd look at Asia. Some of my school friends were from Malaysia and other parts of, and Hong Kong and other parts of Asia. So Asia really interested me sort of growing up. It was a very mysterious place. I'd see it on TV, the Japan economic miracle. So when I was at college, I wasn't really interested in working in the UK, to be honest with you. I wanted to go traveling. I took quite a few years out between my post and undergraduate degrees. I did environmental technology at university. So I was always interested in going overseas. So when I saw a thing called the JET program, I applied for that and came to Japan. That was the reason I came to Japan. Always really interested in Japan. I love gadgets. It was just in the sort of mid-80s or late 80s, it was just this mysterious place. So when I came here, the plan was to be here for 1 year, but 32 years later, I'm still here.
How many years later?
32 years later, I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm a similar story. I came for 2. And now for me, it's 39 years later. So mine's not continuous, but I think yours is continuous.
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah, I had some breaks in the middle, but you've really done well to keep going with it. So well
yes. So obviously, as I said, I did environmental technology. So I wasn't really interested in the English teaching. So I did JET for a few years. Mm-hmm. And then
I'll just explain to people who don't know what a JET is.
Sure.
What is a JET?
So the JET program is basically a program run by the Japanese government where thousands of people from Western countries come to Japan and throughout the whole of Japan teaching, it's modern English these days, but teaching languages at junior high schools and senior high schools to help Japan internationalize. So it was a great program. In fact, quite a few people on the board of the British Chamber are ex-JETs as well. Alison Beale and a few others. Sarah Backley, our executive director, were all ex-JETs.
Alison's the running Oxford printing press here.
Correct.
Oxford Press, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah. So quite a good job.
Yes.
So I have to wonder about the success of that program because the English language levels in Japan doesn't seem to advance as proportionately as it should, given all of this massive effort that's going on here. But anyway, that's a different podcast. So you've been here continuously, and after you were a JET, where did you move to then?
Yes, so I was based in Nagasaki, which
That's a nice place, Nagasaki.
Yes,
yeah.
And there's obviously a large Mitsubishi Heavy Industries presence there. They have a shipyard. So my friend at the time knew that I was leaving JET. He was doing business with the shipyard. He happened to notice there was a foreigner working in their procurement department and just said to them, do you think that you might be looking for some other people? And next thing I knew, I ended up working at the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in their procurement, in their international procurement department, basically buying machinery for power plants from overseas countries. So that was my first venture into international trade. And that's really that got me on my whole international trade career here in Japan. And a lot of my work since then has been in international trade. And that's another reason why to become president of the British Chamber of Commerce as well, of course.
So doing a lot of market entry, I guess, for different foreign products and services too, I suppose.
Yes.
Or mainly products.
So MHI was basically, that was, procuring stuff from all over products from all over the world. After MHI, I worked for the British government in Osaka, the British Consulate-General. So that was basically trade with Japan.
What year was that?
That was, actually, originally I started in Fukuoka. There was an office in Fukuoka that at the British Trade Promotion Office. I ran that from 2002 to 2005.
Oh, so you were the trade commissioner, or whatever the equivalent is in the British government?
Yes, it wasn't a consulate. It was a sort of
a trade office.
Yes, okay. So I was the representative in Kyushu
you were
there.
The Kyushu rep. Okay, right.
That closed down, and then I moved to a job in Osaka. And that was basically promoting trade, British companies selling to Japan, and then Japanese companies investing in the UK.
This would have been part of the consulate, I presume.
Correct, the Consulate-General.
And who was the Consul-General at that
time? Neil Hook was when I first started, then Paul Lynch. I think this is 20 years ago now.
Yeah. So what year are we talking now? What are we?
So Osaka was 2005 to 2008.
Okay, so it came. I was Consul General for Australia from 96 to 2001.
Right.
So I'm just one generation ahead of you there.
Yeah.
Okay. And doing very similar work to what you were doing in terms of market entry, that type of thing.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I know that world pretty well. So what was your role? What was your position in the hierarchy there?
So I was a local hire.
Right.
So when I finished up there, I was a senior inward investment officer. So at that time, it was basically getting Japanese companies to invest in the UK, specifically in the energy and electronic space. So I would meet companies like Panasonic, Horeba, Nintendo, getting them to do either invest in the UK in factories or R&D centres or sales offices, or expanding their operations in the UK. So as you can imagine, companies like Panasonic had various operations in the UK. So I was trying to get them to do more and more stuff with the UK. Basically.
They've got a massive presence, of course, in Japan, but particularly in Kansai, right?
Yes,
that's where
exactly.
They're coming from. So massive factories down there.
Yes, exactly.
Astoundingly huge factories with Panasonic. And so what happens after that?
So basically, 2008, Prince Charles was coming to Japan. Huge visit, royal visit, as you can imagine. I was involved as part of that.
People should understand that when you have something like a presidential visit or prime ministerial visit, a case of Prince Charles and his Prince Charles, the embassy needs to draw on a lot of bodies because he's one person, but he's got his entourage, and then you've got the media, and you've got all these gear that's got to be moved around, and then you've got a lot of events. So there's a real need for labour, isn't there, to make all that stuff happen?
Well, we had, so basically my role was to set up literally a 20-minute meeting at Sharp. They had an operation in the UK making solar panels. And that 20-meeting minute, I think I went to Sharp about 13 times from a year beforehand. And literally, the schedule was down to the last second. But anyway, during that whole process, I got a call from my boss in Tokyo. He knew that I was a local hire, that I probably would leave at some point because I'd sort of reached the ceiling of the organization. And he said to me, there's a company called Intralink. They're looking for people. I might be interested, which is really kind of him. So he put me in contact with someone from Intralink, had a chat with them, came up a couple of times when I was coming up here to talk about Prince Charles, had a couple of meetings with Intralink, and next thing I knew, they'd offered me
So Intralink has been around for how long?
So Intralink started in 1990. We started originally in Japan. Our first office was here in Japan. We're nominally a British company, but our first office was here in Japan, and very much started from helping British companies come into the Japanese market. And at that time, it was mostly in the B2C sector. So sort of apparel and sort of fashion and sort of goods like that. But we moved to tech around the late 90s and early noughties because we saw a big future in tech. We really sort of backed that then, and very much since then, Intralink is all about bringing tech companies, helping them come into the Asian market now because we're a global company. So we're not only Japan, we have other offices as well, but really tech is at the core of what we do in innovation.
So you mentioned to me earlier that before we went on camera, there's like 35 people in the office here.
Yes.
And how many people would be in Intralink globally now? How big is the organisation?
So we're up to about 140 people now globally.
Oh, that's impressive.
And if you look at a map of our footprint across the globe, where there's tech, generally there's an Intralink office, one person or more, of course. I think in the UK now we've got about 25. Korea, we're going gangbusters. I think we're up to about 30 people there.
And is this a public company or a private company?
We're a private company, although last year we did receive private equity investment to help us grow and go to the next level. So in the next 4 years, we intend to grow the company significantly and probably enter new markets and offer new products and services. So currently look at Southeast Asia and other areas to expand our footprint, of course, as well.
And you're not just doing market entry for British companies, you're doing it globally now.
Well, exactly. So basically we're working in the tech and innovation space. So we broadly do three main things. So helping venture companies and scale-ups come to Asia or increasingly globalize, sell overseas. We're helping Asian corporates to source innovation overseas. And then we work in the government space, helping governments and embassies and economic development organizations around their trade and investment work. So that could be helping with trade missions or helping them to secure investment out of this region. So currently here in Japan, we represent the state of South Carolina, Washington State, and we just started a project with Choose New Jersey as well, representing them here in the Japanese market and going and seeking inward investment for them.
Because otherwise they have to establish their own offices, which is very difficult for them.
Yes.
So if I think back in what you've described in your career, it sounds like when you're in, Fukuoka, I guess, was the office you were running there. It must have been a fairly small operation, I guess.
Yes, two of us.
You and a Japanese.
Yes, correct.
So I started in Nagoya exactly the same way, two of us. And we were doing inbound trade promotion from Australia for products and services. And I remember when there's two people, you are just run off your feet all the time. You're doing everything, every industry, the whole thing. So that was intriguing for me in terms of learning how to lead a team got slightly bigger, not that much bigger. When I went to Osaka, it was a much bigger team. It was about 20 odd people when I got there. But I found this is my first experience to lead people. I made a whole bunch of mistakes, unfortunately. Finally learned a few things. But how about you? This is probably your first experience also to be leading anybody, let alone in Japan. So how was that in terms of the learning curve?
Yes. So actually, at MHI, although I was a sort of contract worker there, I didn't directly manage people. I used that as an opportunity. I knew that I wouldn't change MHI overnight, but I saw it as an opportunity to change small things within the company. So, and that relates to the way Japanese people work. So, although I didn't manage people there, I used that as an opportunity to actually help them to actually achieve more by doing things differently. But yes, obviously Fukuoka was the first chance I actually directly managed someone. Actually, the person I worked with was actually very good, and I didn't have a lot of issues. So I think it was probably roles after that where I had more challenges. But I think in terms of generally, you think about managing Japanese people, probably there's a couple of things that spring to mind. One is the the flexibility or rigidity. Things are fixed, it's always, we have to do it this way. It's always been done this way.
And the other one is it can't be done.
Well, exactly right.
That's the other flip side, right?
Yes.
It has to be done this way. It can't be done. That's the other side of it, yeah.
So that was when I first encountered that, I thought, of course it can be done. You just got to find a way to do it. So that's where I used my experience of MHI, where I would take small victories to actually, for a bigger one. So actually, rather than saying it can't be done, maybe doing it by myself and showing them it can be done first, so leading by example and doing it, saying, let's do it this. And they say, no, it can't be done. And I would go and do it to show it could be done and say, look, here, I've done it. It can be done right. So I think that's where in Japan, often I've shown people examples by doing it myself to show that it actually can be done. And
I think that's a reflection of how we are evaluated, rewarded, promoted in Western countries around taking risk, taking accountability, innovation. Whereas in Japan, it's don't rock the boat, don't make any mistakes, don't blow anything up, and okay, you won't be rewarded particularly, but you won't be punished. So we're coming at it from two different angles, aren't we? And I guess when you got to Osaka, eventually you got to the, I guess in the trade area, sort of the top position in
Yes.
Osaka. So how many people were reporting to you there?
So I think not so many, honestly speaking. There was so I was line manager for about 3 or 4 people, but I work with others, of course. So about 3 or 4 people, I would say, where I had to on a yearly basis evaluate them, praise them, give them objectives and stuff like that.
And also the types of Japanese who work for foreign organisations, particularly government organisations, are usually extremely well paid.
Yes.
Compared to other people. They usually got pretty good English, and that's why they're there. And they're usually pretty proud to be working in this, what they consider elite government institutions. Like, you're coming from Australia, you tend to disparage the government and you're thinking about bureaucrats and this sort of stuff. But in Asia, and particularly in Japan, bureaucrats are held in high regard because they come from very elite backgrounds. It's a completely different perspective. So I found you could get very good quality people to come and work for you, and they enjoyed the work actually because the variety, access to, like when you've come through the door with that badge with a big crest on it from Australia or from the UK, that door opener is something you don't get in the private sector so easily. So, and that again, that access is terrific. So, what were some of the things that you noticed were different for you when you're going from like a 2-person operation to a little bit bigger operation? You're part of a bigger operation also. What are some things you had to step up in terms of your leadership to make that adjustment?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing was just making sure things kept on track, and that you're right that the Consulate-General, the embassies here attract the very, very good people that have excellent skills, are internationally minded, that have a slightly different mindset as well. But you still need to get the best out of those people and make them perform, of course. So I think for me, really, it's always been about the end result. If you look at the daily, your daily list is sort of, I've got all these tasks to do, you're going to destroy yourself, right? So always especially with Japanese colleagues, focus on the end result. What is the end result? Okay, the end result is we want to get Panasonic to expand in the UK, for example, right? So to do that, we have all these tasks along the way. We've got to invite them to some dinner, or we've got to take them to some event, or we've got to share this information with them or meet them, or whatever it is, right? So rather than just saying, here's a long list of tasks to do, I would say, look, to get Panasonic to invest, these are some of the things we need to do along the way to do that. So I think really to make sure that they understand the big picture, because I think often Japanese get buried in the detail and miss what that big picture is, that it's to get that investment or whatever it is. But along the way is some of that process is needed. And again, showing there's a process here. Japan, as you know, is very process orientated. So if you just say, look, go and do that, right? And do it however you want. They won't do it because they're just lost. But here's a process, right? There's a whiteboard over there. There's a line, right? Here we are today. Here's the end goal. What do we need to do along that line to get to that, investment? So I find that if we brainstorm that with Japanese colleagues, they go, oh, okay, yes, I do this, and I do this, and I do this, I do that. Most Western people would just look at the end goal and just go and get it right. Whereas I think Japanese need a bit of hand-holding and showing them that process to get to the end result.
One of the things I found too with the people who work for us, and I was in Austrade, these people, the Japanese staff, had unbelievable networks and deep, long-built connections, just incredible. And so because they're in the job for a long time, and we rotate in and out as foreigners. I spent 12 years in trade promotion, so I'm in Nagoya for 4, Osaka for 4 or so, and then I came out. But we're moving, but they're not. And the other thing too is the ability to get to the right people to make things happen too. Although one of the things I wonder about in terms of as a leader, when I started, we were and again, it depends on which political party's in power at home, and who's the particular minister of this particular department at any point in time. The numbers or the targets or the outputs would change. When I started, it was on how much revenue we would bring in terms of exports that we helped. Then it changed to how much money we could earn charging Australian exporters for our professional services. And then it changed to how many new exporters we could get into the market. And so I think for the Japanese, they found that very frustrating, because the goalpost, every political cycle of ministerial change would change the numbers and what was the goal. So that was always quite difficult to lead people in that circumstance. But did you have a constant number that you had to go and get that was not having these massive politically influenced fluctuations like I had?
No, I experienced the pendulum.
You did? Okay.
Yes. So I think...
and how do you deal with that as a leader?
Well, so just to give you a view, I think in the 7 years I worked for the British government in Fukuoka and Osaka, I think we had 3 name changes of the organisation.
Oh, right? Good.
Good. So the pendulum definitely swung. So I think in terms of keeping Japanese staff motivated and on site, for me it was always about, again, the end result, right? So KPIs are KPIs, and targets are targets. But at the end of the day, British government here is wanting to get more trade and more investment, period, right? So for me, it was always explaining, look, the British government might be saying this or that or whatever, but it's still about getting Panasonic to do more in the UK or whatever it is, right? So again, I would keep them focused on the bigger picture, an end goal, and try not to get them, too frustrated in sort of the detail along the way. And let them vent, of course. Part of management is basically you don't vent down, you vent up. I think it was that Saving Private Ryan, that famous scene where he says, vents go up, not down, right? You let staff vent up to you, but you never vent down to staff. You never, I was just as frustrated or annoyed that all these changes as well.
Well, that's an interesting point, though, because some leaders do vent down with a specific objective of uniting the people behind them. They use it as a means of follow me. I get your frustration. And if there's those people over there, if they'd only do their damn job, we'd be able to do our job. So let's follow me, and they create enemies within the organisation. And, this divisional head, typically in companies too, is fighting with that divisional head. So the two divisions are all competing or fighting.
Yeah.
And the actual real enemy is the rival company outside, but they're wasting all their energies in this scene warfare. So you do tend to get some leaders who will do that, which is sort of a toxin, really, inside organisations if you're trying to get some collaboration going. So that does happen. There's no doubt about that.
That's not really my style, though.
No, well, it's not a healthy one, that's for sure. Yeah, and so when you made the move from government, trade promotion, to basically the same type of work, but in the commercial sector, and I don't know what level you came in here with Intralink, but at some point you must have started running a team here, I guess, or from the very beginning, I'm not sure.
So when I moved to Intralink, I took a little step down, of course, changed. So I was a project manager, so I wasn't managing anyone at the time, but within a year and a half, I was promoted to director and started managing people, of course. And then that was 14 odd years ago. And then when I joined Intralink 15 years ago, we were around the corner in a smaller office. I think there was about 12 or 13 of us, and as you mentioned, we're tripled in size.
You're huge, yeah.
We've really grown.
And
yes.
what was the thing you had to do to step yourself up, to do both that switch from government, it's got a very particular flavour and dimension to it, to private sector, and then leading people here. You're in Tokyo as well, so you're not in Fukuoka, you're not in Osaka. I wasn't in Fukuoka, but I was in Nagoya, so that regional hub, understand that. Osaka, Kansai, it's a particular thing in itself, and then Tokyo again, which is a different thing. So what some step changes you had to make, did you find, to make that transition across?
Yeah, so, Intralink is a private company. We have private sector clients. We always have public sector clients, but at the end of the day, we're a private company. So our revenues come from our clients, our customers, basically. So really, it's about getting results. It's as simple as that. If we don't get the results, we won't have the clients. One of the reasons I actually wanted to move back to the private sector was the thrill of the chase. In sales, it's about getting results. So that the thrill of the chase. And that's why I love working here, because One, you get the thrill of the chase in terms of chasing deals, and deals come in many different forms. It can be monetary values, or it can be signing partners and so forth. But also, it's hugely satisfying in terms of following tech trends. So when I first started, it was TV projects and phone projects, because that's when Japan used to make that stuff, but it doesn't make it anymore. Now it's robotics, it's autonomous, or it's very, very different. So you just never get bored. We're always new technologies. So again, I think that's a way to motivate our staff here and keep them engaged. It's these new technologies. We use that as an opportunity. So to keep our staff engaged, that a new project comes along, it's a new technology. So sure, you've got to learn it, but you're not sort of sitting around getting bored, doing the same thing day in, day out, of course.
And when you say you've got to learn it, I mean, same when I was doing that business, we were across a number of industries, a spectrum of industries. And so you can never be the expert, but what you can be is that 5% or 7% or 10% that's the key to know how to sell this or how to make something happen. And then in fact, I found it too, that a broad sweep across different industry sectors gives you a different type of perspective than someone who's working in the one industry their whole career. And you see things and you see dots that you can connect where you've seen something work somewhere else, or someone did something somewhere else. You think, you know what, you could probably apply that here. And they wouldn't necessarily, it's like that sort of A to Z, broadband of company in A and a company in Z probably never talk to each other, but you're dealing with all of them.
Exactly.
So I always found that was sort of fascinating, a very innovative, great creativity from that. I wonder if you had that experience.
Yes, no, absolutely. So, as a company, we're just where, we want to be the best in what we do. Of course, we want to be the best. So of course, we have to work hard at doing that. But it's hugely satisfying when we do that, of course. And we work with some really, really interesting companies. Venture companies that scale ups and then become unicorns. $1 billion companies. So these are really successful companies, and the people leading those companies are also really inspiring. So when we have our clients visit here, not only are we going to meet potential customers, but we have a week to listen to some really interesting people. So some characters, well, could be a whole nother podcast, but some of the characters we get to listen to on the Shinkansen ride down to Osaka, or in the restaurant at night. Some of the stories about what they've done in their careers, really, really interesting. People, ex-Intel people, NVIDIA, or companies around the world that we've all known about, senior people that have left that, set up their own sort of venture companies, and are now doing really interesting things as well, of course.
In terms of getting ideas to come up from the bottom, you talked before about engagement, and that's great. I'm just thinking also, often when we are senior leaders and we've got a lot of different experiences, and we're drawing on the world, and you've got Japanese staff who are not necessarily drawing on the world, we tend to have a lot of ideas. And being, as I said before, the way we're promoted, educated, rewarded, we're expected to be innovative. We're expected to come up with ideas, expected to drive execution and create something new. So one of the dangers is that you become the centerpiece of all the innovation, with all the ideas, and your Japanese team members are just doing stuff that you're telling them to do, as opposed to tapping into their experiences and their ideas and getting the bottom-up stuff. What have you found has worked well to make sure that you're not being, dominant and got to learn to shut up and actually ask other people what they think instead of telling them what you think? What have you found works well to do that?
So within our company we have a process for doing stuff, whether it be getting meetings or whatever it is. So we provide our staff with that sort of backbone of a process.
This is a brainstorming process?
So it's for how we do
ideation process.
So for doing various things. So in business development, there's a few things we need to do on a regular basis. We need to long list companies to go, target companies to go and meet. And then we need to contact them and set up meetings, basically. So there's a few things in our company that are really fixed. So we have a process to help our staff, understand what the job is at a top level. But then, so we give them the tools to do that. But then we let them, have a certain amount of freedom to do it how they want. We don't dictate to them, right, you have to be on the phone at 10 in the morning or calling these people. So and then we have a regular reviews with our colleagues, weekly sync ups and stuff like that, to make sure they're keeping on track. So we don't want to sort of sit on their shoulders and dictate what they're doing, to give them amount of freedom, but also on the flip side of that, not let them fail either. Often, with new staff, let them make small mistakes, because you've got to learn by your mistakes, right? So we know that.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, you and I have grown up in societies where you learn by your mistakes,
yes,
and that's appreciated. But this is a country,
yes,
no defects,
yes,
no errors,
yes,
no minimum viable
yes,
product unless it's already perfect, and no mistakes. And yet, how do we help Japanese grow when they've grown up very contained, very risk averse, very cautious about doing anything new? I just had this the other day. I met a guy at an event. It's a joint venture between two energy businesses that have combined to make a new company. I wanted to meet their HR people to introduce Dale Carnegie. No. Like, we've been around for 112 years. We've been here for, since 63. 63 years, I should say. No, not interested. It's like, hang on a minute, but this is the mentality: is don't know you, don't want to know you, not going to think about, these guys have been around for a long time, they might have something really interesting here, we could perhaps use that. No, don't do anything. So you run into this.
Yeah.
So on that point though, how do you get around that issue?
Yeah,
of fear of making a mistake, to actually let people learn through doing.
So let them make small mistakes. So maybe we could see they're walking into a mistake, but let it happen so they can actually get that experience and actually realize that, okay, it's not so bad to make a mistake, and actually you can learn from it. Obviously not big mistakes. The other thing is we provide an environment where it's conducive to opening and sharing and brainstorming. We tend, on most projects, we work in small teams, probably mostly 2 or 3 people. But we try and provide opportunities for cross-working. So, different people can work with other people, so they can see different managers and their different styles. And then we can see other staff and, help and inspire them. And also other ways through like team meetings and stuff like that. So we provide lots of opportunities for our staff to either, in the most comfortable environment, to sort of think about stuff and share stuff, whether that be through a team meeting or other activities. We do our extracurricular stuff. We encourage stuff outside of work. So we sometimes do charity work together, or we have other events where we'll go off site and do stuff together to try and again get our staff to feel more comfortable talking to each other and sharing ideas. And so we're always conscious of if you're on one project, you're just blinkered with that one project. So we try and share, other people's experiences, so they understand. Oh, okay, my colleague is having a different project, but having very similar issues. Struggling to get meetings or whatever it is. So again, we're a sharing environment where people can share stories, and then, oh, okay, actually, next time I contact a company, I'll do that. My colleague did it this way, and that might be interesting. So we try and provide that environment where best practice like that is shared. So and so that colleagues can feel more comfortable maybe doing things differently than they would normally do it.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. And what about building trust? You know, you worked in Mitsubishi Heavy
Yeah.
in the procurement department, and so you've seen the Japanese organization, how that works, and then you've worked in trade promotion and funding, and now you're working in a very similar business. But in terms of what things have you found have worked well to build trust with people? You talked before a little bit about MHI, how things that they didn't think could be done, you would then do them and say, well, actually it can be done. This is sort of building belief in you and giving you credit for doing something they never considered possible. But what have you found in terms of directing people that works well to develop the trust in you as a leader?
It's probably a couple of things. So one is leading by example. So again, if we go out to a meeting, showing them, things can be done in certain ways. So rather than saying, go and do this, I'll say, let's go and do this. I would do it and show them. And then next time they can then do it, for example. So leading by example. And then I think the other thing is, despite the fact I've been here for 32 years, there's still things that I scratch my head and I can't fathom about the Japanese, people or country or culture. So again, engaging with my Japanese colleagues and ask them questions about stuff, saying like, I've just been to this meeting and so did this. And why? And, I just didn't understand it. So again, showing them I'm vulnerable and I'm challenging stuff, and then giving them a chance then for them to share their culture with me to, again, get them to open up to me, for example.
Well, that point about vulnerability is interesting, isn't it? Because usually as leaders, we are relying on our status power. We're relying on our knowledge, our experience, our intellect, our ability to say, I'm the leader, follow me. And vulnerability implies weakness, not all-knowing. And so that, for a lot of leaders, that vulnerability exposure, very hard for them to do. They feel they always have to be Mr. or Miss Perfect or as close as you can get to it. And there are no vulnerabilities shown. And also, I think, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and coming from Australia, Australia's a very macho culture down there. Or at least when I was growing up it was. It may have changed. I haven't been there for a long time. But men never showed weakness, vulnerabilities, no. So that whole concept, how do leaders get around the feeling that, well, I can't show vulnerability because people won't respect me. And here I am in Japan. Are Japanese going to have a problem following the foreigner who's got these vulnerabilities? Or does the foreigner have to be even more perfect than the Japanese to be followed? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so obviously I don't show them all my vulnerabilities. So I still obviously lead with confidence. But I think perhaps, opening a chink in a curtain a bit, perhaps, when I'm showing my vulnerabilities. So I think just to show I'm human. Of course, I still will, have strong leadership and clear direction and all of those other things. But occasionally opening the chink in the curtain a bit to show that, there is a different side of me. And actually we're all in this together, for example.
Yeah, I tell my team, don't ask me for anything creative after 3:00 in the afternoon. You get nothing out of me. Come back the next day. And it's a humorous point, but it's a true point for me. That's how my body rhythm works and my biorhythm works, and my intellect and my creativity. I just know by the afternoon I'm conked out. But it's sort of like an excuse too, they come back tomorrow, it's like, the boss, he's no good after 3. But it is a little bit of a vulnerability, and it is an honest vulnerability in my case. And again, I'm not Superman, I can't produce great ideas 24 hours a day. I need something else there. In terms of culture, you've worked in MHI, which has got a specific culture. The JET program has got a specific culture. In trade promotion, you're working for the government, there's a particular culture. Now, Intralink has its own culture. What have you found works well to build a culture with teams?
So here at Intralink, we're all about results. So we have clients that are paying us to get results. So that's the core of whatever we do. So built into that is a huge element of proactivity about finding a way, if a company says no to a meeting, finding another way until you get a yes. So the culture in our company is can do, basically. So a lot of what we do always focuses around that look, if something happens, looking at why it's happened and some sort of roadblock to make sure we can get around that. And that's where, again, as a leader, the staff we work with don't necessarily have all the results, and that's where the leadership can step in and say, look, what's going on here? Oh, okay, we can see what's happening here, and help to our colleagues to sort of overcome those challenges. So I think that definitely that builds a culture of management, are interested in helping us to get results. And when I have problems, I can come to my manager and help me to sort of get around that. So a lot of what we do is all about can do and proactivity.
And how do you drive that? I mean, you just give an example of in the workplace when issues come up and trying to apply that to it. But I'm just thinking, do you have other tools like vision, mission, values, or mantra, or whatever that you go through on a regular basis, anything like that? Or is it very just much on the job training type of thing?
It's a number of things. So for example, our team meetings, we put up some metrics, and it's it's not really a competition, but it's just like a scoreboard. So we have recently we have things like who's had the most meetings this year, who's got the most contacts. And again, it's not, obviously, each project is different. Some projects may only have 2 or 3 targets, so you don't have many meetings. So we don't necessarily, it's just to show our colleagues that here's, this colleague's getting great meetings. So again, our other colleagues can go and talk to them and understand how they're doing that. So again, open and sharing on what we're doing, and sort of celebrating the best in what we do. So of course, if we only were interested in meetings and contacts, we wouldn't get business, and it's part of it. But it's a culture where we're trying to build. Look, to get deals, we have to go and meet people, and to go and meet people, we have to know people. So 2 of those metrics are meetings and contacts. So let's celebrate that every month, who's doing well, and so forth. And then in those team meetings also sharing, well, who's struggling on a project, who needs extra help. And again, not being afraid to put up your hand and sort of show that, look, on this project, and we've met this group of people, but we're still trying to meet people in these areas. Can anyone help out, and so forth.
Yes, well, getting meetings in Japan is not that necessarily straightforward or simple. I mean, in a Western context, you just ring up the person and say, I want to meet you, and probably they'll meet you, But here, they don't know who you are. The classic is you send them some piece of information of Intralink, doesn't get read, just goes straight into the gomibaku, into the waste paper basket, and gone. Never heard of them, out. So it's more difficult to hear, but again, this is risk aversion, fear of the unknown, don't know if they can trust you. So it's not that easy, is it, getting stuff? In terms of thinking about, what have you come up with any personal habits that you found are very effective, which you've been able to help train the people with you? Because often, again, we're working in a global environment, and we're getting a lot of information. We're picking up ways of doing business, and we start to develop good habits, which may not be common habits here. Just wondering, are there any particular good habits you found for yourself which work very well you can share?
So a lot of our job is we're multitasking. Well, all jobs these days are multitasking. So I'm ruthlessly organized. So the way I keep saying is by being very, very organized. So that's my schedule in terms of knowing what I need to do, where I need to be, all of that. So I spend a lot of time with my colleagues here, instilling that time management, instilling how to be organized to help them, because it's not easy when colleagues come in here and start at Intralink. They easily get swamped with these technologies, all these foreign companies, and got to do all these meetings and try and get deals, and it's tough. So I always bring people back to be rigidly organized, and know your body rhythms. So for me, it's basically I get up early in the morning, those first 3 hours at home, I can bang off a whole lot of emails, get a whole lot of work done, come into the office, talk to people, and have a very productive day. And then, after 3, don't bother asking me anything, because I'm similar. I just won't get you won't get an answer out from me. So that's when I go out and do my networking and so forth, because it's conducive to that. So know your rhythms and work for them. So I spend a lot of time with my staff, getting that right with them, because if you can get that right, that's half the battle.
about, do you have a list of written down, be it in a electronic schedule otherwise, of prioritized goals for the day? When we do leadership training, I often ask the group, there's usually 20, 30 in the group, how many people here have written down prioritized goals for each day? And the number of middle management leaders who put their hand up is relatively very, very few. I'm always surprised by that. I wonder, well, okay, then maybe they've got some other system they're using. They're not using this particular system. But I'm wondering, do you do that as well? Do you have a prioritized list of things to do in the day?
So I would say, because I've been doing it so long, a lot of it's in my head. But with digital sort of, what's the word? Digital prompts. So for any week, I'll look at the week and what's happening during that week, and then mentally think, okay, on Monday I need to be doing X, Y, and Z, and on Tuesday perhaps these sort of things. So I have that sort of top level view. But as you know, things happen and things change.
Priorities can change quite quickly.
So that's where. So I've got a number of systems, either using my inbox or my calendar to sort of cope with that. So I've got a general top level view that's in my head, and then a sort of digital prompts either with my calendar or with my inbox, basically. So that's sort of the system I have. And again, I sort of share that with my colleagues. I don't say you have to use this. I just say, look, this is a way to do things. Adapt it yourself. And actually, it's sort of loosely based on the getting things done. There was a book, I don't know, quite old, I guess these days, where in the morning with mail, basically if you can answer the mail in a couple of minutes, you do it. Longer stuff, then you set aside a bit of time during the week to actually do that thing. So I use very much that on a daily basis to clear out a whole lot of rubbish. Oh, not rubbish, a whole lot of stuff, from
Freudian slip, right?
Sorry, yes, a whole lot of stuff that needs to get done, and then focus on the really important things for us, yes.
And what about resilience? Because the period of time you've been in Japan, we've had recessions, we had the Lehman shock, we had earthquake, tsunami, triple nuclear meltdown. We've just come out of, well, actually, I'm not even sure we're actually out of the pandemic yet. The training industry is certainly not out of the pandemic from what I can see yet. What have you found works well to have resilience to cover these sorts of things that come up from time to time or come up with some degree of regularity, actually, don't they? Whatever works for you.
So as a company, generally, we try and diversify our client base from around the world in terms of whether it be government or private sector. So that sort of diversified client base. Locally here in Japan, so we are prepared for natural disasters and stuff. We have emergency, we do drills once a year, and we have supplies here in the office and things like that. For bigger, more macro stuff, so other than disasters, I think at management level, we're obviously monitoring the news and trying to sort of anticipate that. So through the chamber, obviously I get exposure to a lot of intel, which is great. So I'll share that with my colleagues about what's happening, around the world and geopolitically and stuff, and sort of anticipating, okay, if this is happening here, probably this is going to have an effect and so forth. So I think when, Ukraine kicked off a few years ago, I thought, oh, here we go, that's going to affect stuff in Europe and start to sort of brace ourselves for that. So I guess a number of ways we would
What
do
about
it.
Yourself personally, though?
Oh, personally?
Personal resilience, apart from
I see.
bouncing on the hard bitumen of the highway when you've pranged your bike and getting up and carrying on. What have you found works well in terms of being resilient as a leader?
So I think for me, it's so as a leader at any company, I think you can get really so that you can just spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if you're not too careful on your job. So for me, it's very much finding I don't know if this is a stereotype, whatever, the work-life balance. So for me personally, I live down in Hayama, so at weekends I go out. I work in my garden, I do barbecues on the beach, I go sailing or whatever. So I, refresh myself. So that's weekends. And then really sort of focused on making sure that I'm not running myself into the ground, knowing my limits. So I think throughout my career, there's been a few times when I could have perhaps, gone past those limits and, even hospitalized myself, with ulcers and stuff like that. But using those experiences where I've almost gone to the limit as, okay, I can take that much, but not anymore. And so these days I sort of know my limits. So if I'm getting towards there, make sure I flag that up with, senior management.
Self-regulate a bit better when you get a bit older, right?
Exactly. So when I was younger, you just didn't know, and things happen.
Where's the limit?
Yes, you go to it, right?
And then you break down, right?
Yes,
You
exactly.
get sick.
Yes.
You usually get massively sick.
Yes.
And what about if someone rang up and they said, Richard, look, my company's sending me to Japan. They want me to run the Japan operation, but I don't speak Japanese. I don't know Japan. How can I be an effective leader here? What would be some advice you'd give them?
So I think for Japan, it's very important to listen and observe. So Japan is very different from many other cultures. So listen and observe, see it, listen to what people are saying and how they're saying it and why they're saying it, observe why they're doing it and saying it. And then I would say also never assume. So because just because you do something somewhere in your country doesn't mean to say it's done the same way here in Japan. So we have a lot of clients that come here, their business models don't work here. They assume that, oh yes, I sell my product that way overseas, I can just do the same thing.
And the packaging, and the color, and the weight. And,
so never assume, right?
No problem.
And the same comes with management. So again, never assume that because Westerners give opinions or whatever, that you're going to get the same here in Japan. So if those two things would be, I think, the two biggest things.
Two biggest things. Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that too, isn't there? Yeah, I guess that expectation, assumption thing is always hard. What about language? Should they learn Japanese when they're here?
So I think they should make an effort. Yes, I think it. So if you're here just on a short posting, right, for a few years. Then unless you're an expert at languages, you're never going to master Japanese in that time unless you've previously learnt it. So I wouldn't expect those people to become to sort of very proficient at it. But I would say get to a certain level that you can sort of have small conversations with your colleagues in Japanese, maybe even in the evening at the restaurant or whatever, or make friends and talk to people. We were talking about this the other week with a friend that. In a few years' time, you'll have AI that, you'll have a little device, you'll talk into it and you won't need to learn a language. But learning a language takes time and effort. And actually, even a little bit of effort, you can start to understand if you're speaking directly to them in their language, there's something different about that.
It's also the door to understanding, or the window, whichever metaphor you like, for understanding the culture too.
Exactly.
Because obviously the language and the culture are interlinked, and just having the machine to translate my words, it doesn't give you any insight into the culture, does it?
Not at all.
No, that's going to be, you need to work on that. And just talk a little bit now about, as the president, 2 years now of the chamber, I was president of the Australia New Zealand Chamber as well. I've been in that same role. I was for about 4 years, I think I was president, where you have a group of volunteers. No one's getting paid except for the administrators who run the chambers, but they're not running it in that sense in terms of decision making. You have people on a board. You have to come up with some sort of decisions as a board. Herding cats is one of the descriptions. It can be. How do you make decisions? How do you get people to cooperate? How do you get people to follow you? What's the balance between being, a sort of dictator on the board and having collaboration? And what have you found has worked well to be the leader of that type of volunteer organization where, you're the president, but you're the first amongst equals?
Yes. So I think importantly, knowing and understand the personalities and qualities of each and everyone on the board. So spending time to get to know them, of course, and then using their strengths to get help on the board, whatever it is. So I think that's first and foremost. Always on a board like that, there's hugely different personalities and hugely different opinions, of course. But that's what you want on a board, because we want the diversity there to get to make sure we're making the right sort of decisions. So for big picture stuff, of course, that's board level stuff that we have on a monthly basis where we'll decide that. But there are the smaller stuff that as president, I have to decide with our executive director, Sarah, of course. So there's a lot of that going on as well. So I think it's understanding the bigger picture stuff and the smaller stuff. And then on our board, understanding those characters and personalities and their what they can bring to the chamber, and making sure they are bringing that to the chamber, of course.
And like you, I was in the government, so I was very much used to VIP visits to Japan, used to dealing with ministers, prime ministers, this type of thing. You're Prince Charles, you mentioned before. But a lot of people are not. You were in the government as well, so you had a window to that world, and you knew, right, there's going to be media, there's going to be handlers. And the handlers, I always found, are your worst nightmare, because they don't know Japan, but they're trying to think about what could possibly go wrong and then run you ragged up a dry gully for no good point at all, for their fevered imagination. That was always challenging. But you've come from that world, and I came from that world. So when we're leading a chamber, we've dealing with the British government, dealing with VIPs coming here. We've got the Lord Mayor coming very shortly, right? You're used to that. But a lot of people are not. They're just workers in companies, and they happen to be in Japan, and they happen to be in the chamber, and they become the president. Any advice for people on how to deal with VIPs like that, and in your case, it's royalty as well involved? Any views on that?
So I think really, those handlers or those people trying to understand where they're coming from, right? And then trying to sort of find a compromise, because you're never going to sort of satisfy them completely. So really understanding where they're coming from and a compromise, and then trying to preempt stuff as well. So if someone, is known for being difficult to work with or whatever, being ready for that, and maybe you can never be ready for it, but at least, when it comes, it's not such a big shock, perhaps.
Let me just interject with a great story. I can't name the people, but one of them was a very, very senior minister in the Australian government, and a very difficult, demanding personality, extremely well known for this. And when I got to the embassy in 2001, there was a frame with no glass, just a wooden frame, and the wall had been punched in. And just frame. No note, no explanation, nothing. And the guy who punched the wall in frustration of dealing with this very senior Australian official was the most mild-mannered guy. I knew him. I'd met him previously when, different VIP visitors had come. So I knew the guy, very, very calm guy. I wonder, what the hell did they do to this poor guy to get him so enraged? In typical Aussie humour, no one said anything. They didn't fix the wall. They just put a frame around it. I thought that was just genius.
Perfect.
But actually a subsequent ambassador at some point fixed it, and that's gone now. But it was always, I thought that's just the epitome of everyone understood what's going on here. That's the pressure cooker that you could be in those situations. So then it's no small thing. So understanding their point of view is a good one, and the pressures there under.
Yes.
Any other advice?
I think also trying to sort of reason with them as well, that, okay, so we're doing this event for these reasons. So why are we having to do all of this other stuff, right? So again, that's part of the compromise, that yes, look, the goal is to do this event. To do that event, we need to be at X, Y, and Z. So what you're asking over here isn't really relevant. Again, in a diplomatic and polite way of sort of taking the focus off that and putting the focus on the end goal of what you want to achieve as well. And so hopefully that gets forgotten about.
One of the things I learned too is the importance of the gemba, the locale, and called it walking the gemba, walking the locale. And you go to the airport and you see where they will come out. And then you work out, where is the car, and how's the baggage going to get out of the aircraft to get into the car, and who's going to take care of that, and or going the other way, how we're going to get from here to here. When I went to Osaka, it was amazing. We had John Howard as Prime Minister, I remember. It was incredible. They closed the freeway. I mean, they'd open it up behind us, but they closed it in front of us and opened us. We went to Kicks. It was like, minutes. It was unbelievable. It was like completely empty freeway. But that sort of thing, knowing the route and anticipating, where things will be, and knowing that's something when I first got involved in that, I didn't think it was that important, but then I realised how important it was to do that when you've got high level, very high level
Exactly,
VIPs, be
yes.
it the president of your company or board chairman or whoever it might be, don't underestimate knowing what's
Yeah.
going on.
And we at Intralink, actually, we get a lot of practice that when we have clients here, we're very detailed. So we're not, when we're going to meetings, we know exactly where we're going,
Yep.
ahead of time, so that, again, we're showing we're really professional.
Yep.
We know what we're doing, and we're sort of taking leadership. So, of course, with high-level visits, that's on, taken to another level. But yes, all of that's absolutely essential.
And I love it in the government. If you get it all right, no one says anything.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
if there's a screw up,
You never
oh my
forget it.
God, you're going to hear about it
Yes.
forever,
Yes.
So it's all downside, basically.
Yes. Perhaps that's the punch in the wall, right?
Well, I tell you what, I just appreciated the Aussie sense of humour. This cracked me up when I saw that. What would be some advice you'd have for someone, in terms of your definition of leadership? How do you define leadership?
So I'm very much a leader that leads by example, so of course, as a leader, you have to delegate and people have to do stuff for you. But I'm not afraid to sort of, roll my sleeves up and get stuck in and do stuff.
What are you calling that in English? Muck in? Is that
muck
the
in
English,
or whatever? Yes.
English term for it? Muck
so
in?
very much lead by example, and I think also I'm very, very organized. And so because I'm organized, I come across as very calm. But actually, sometimes internally, like everyone else, I'm nervous as hell. I'm stood in front of a group of people or whatever. I'm nervous as hell. But because I use being very organized to sort of calm myself down to do that. So as a leader, I look, in situations really calm, but actually inside, maybe not so calm. But that, again, I train myself to sort of, rigorously before a meeting, the end result is this, we've got to do this and this and this. And that helps me to sort of to deal with it and perhaps, deal in situations when I'm very often outside of my comfort zone. That preparedness is like that. So my leadership very much is looking cool and calm and collected when I'm maybe not, and leading by example, I guess. And
that being calm is important, because if the leader is panicking, it just radiates out.
Yes.
I'll tell you another funny story. We had Prime Minister Paul Keating. We were doing New Australian Cuisine at the New Otani. We had Neil Perry, a very famous Australian chef, had put together this fabulous meal, and lots of people. And the Prime Minister was up in a room, is going to come down, and I was with someone else as the MC. And there was this elaborate signalling system, except that the Japanese staff didn't really know that well what he looked like. So I'm the MC, and so I get the signal, he's coming. So I'm like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Paul Keating. No Paul Keating. Nothing. Somebody else came through the door. That was just a test, ladies and gentlemen. He did very well. I thought, it happened to me twice.
Yeah.
Twice, right? What do you say the second time? And then finally he came. And that was a classic of we didn't quite get the signalling right. We didn't quite have the right people, because it's sort of like elevator to door to, to where I was. So I appreciate you being well organised is important, right?
Yeah. And so, things happen, right? But again, dealing with it and then thinking about it and then acting on it, right?
Learn a hard lesson that
Yes.
day, because when you've got 400 people and they're all looking at you and you look complete dill, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. Well, Richard, thank you very much.
Yep.
It's been fabulous, and I hope that the injury comes good. And I know that you're going off to support the charity event, so thank you for doing that. And I look forward to seeing you. Well, probably the next time I'll see you in the Lord Mayor of London.
Yes, on Friday. Yes.
He's here at the event. I'm going. Yeah.
Yes, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Yep.
So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.